For thousands of years, the atom was just an idea, a really cool philosophical concept, sure, but for actual scientists trying to get work done, it was totally useless. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into how one man, John Dalton, took this ancient ghost of an idea and finally gave it a real job, transforming chemistry from an art into a science.
Okay, let's just dive right into the central puzzle here. The ancient Greeks came up with this amazing idea that everything is made of tiny, indivisible particles they called atoms. But for chemists, for the people actually mixing things and trying to figure out why they react, this idea was a total dead end. It offered zero help. So what was the problem? Well, to get to the bottom of that, you have to realize that the old atomic hypothesis was just incomplete. It was like having a picture without any of the important details, or a story with no real plot.
The real issue was that the atom was purely an abstract thought. You could talk about atoms all day long, but you couldn't do anything with them. And this created two huge roadblocks that basically stopped chemistry dead in its tracks for centuries.
All right, so let's break down these two big problems, the ones that had to be solved before chemistry could ever really move forward.
First up, what you could call the numbers problem. As one historian so brilliantly put it, atoms weren't dressed in numbers. They had no property you could actually measure. Think about it. You couldn't weigh one, you couldn't count them, you couldn't even compare the weight of one to another. And if you can't quantify something, you can't use it in any real scientific calculation. It's that simple.
And then you had the sameness problem. The old way of thinking was that all atoms were made of the same basic stuff, just in different shapes and sizes. But that makes no sense when you look at the world, right? How could atoms made of the exact same material explain why lead is a heavy, dull metal and gold is shiny and doesn't rust? The whole idea just fell apart under a little bit of scrutiny.
So, how did chemistry finally break through these walls? Well, the answer comes from the incredible work of an English chemist named John Dalton, right at the start of the 19th century.
And you know what? We can actually pinpoint the moment this all changed. On September 6, 1803, Dalton scribbled something new in his laboratory journal. The first ever table of relative atomic weights. This was it. This was the moment the atom went from being a ghost to being a real scientific tool.
Dalton's genius was just how beautifully he solved both problems in one go. To fix the numbers problem, he basically said, hey, what if atoms of each element have their own unique special weight? And to solve the sameness problem, he just threw out the old idea entirely and declared that atoms of different elements are fundamentally different things. An atom of gold is not just a differently shaped atom of lead, it's a gold atom, period.
And what's so cool is we can actually see his mind at work here, in his own words. He was thinking about gases, and it just clicked. The particles, the atoms of different gases, have to have different sizes and weights. That simple thought was the seed for his entire system.
And you know, Dalton didn't just stop there. These weren't just loose ideas. He built them into a formal theory, a whole new set of rules that would become the foundation for all of modern chemistry.
All right, here are the 4 pillars of his theory. Number 1, everything is made of atoms. Simple enough. 2, atoms don't get destroyed in chemical reactions. They just get rearranged, kind of like Lego bricks. 3, and this was a game changer, there are as many different types of atoms as there are elements. No more one-size-fits-all atom. And 4, we can actually figure out the relative weights of these different atoms in the lab.
But, you know, a theory is only as good as what it can actually explain, right? The real test is, does it match what we see in the real world? And Dalton's theory passed this test with flying colors. It gave us the very first logical explanation for this weird chemical observation called the law of multiple proportions.
Let's make this super simple. Look at carbon and oxygen. They can make a couple of different things. In carbon monoxide, you get 12 grams of carbon combining with 16 grams of oxygen. But in carbon dioxide, that same 12 grams of carbon hooks up with 32 grams of oxygen. See that right there? 32 is exactly double 16. Why? Dalton's theory nails it. It's because you can combine one carbon atom with one oxygen atom, or you can combine it with 2 oxygen atoms. It happens in these neat whole number ratios because atoms themselves are whole, unbreakable things.
So, what was the big picture impact of all this? What happens when you finally give scientists a way to measure and count and weigh the atom?
I mean, it was a complete game changer. Dalton, almost single-handedly, turned chemistry from a kind of descriptive art into a real, hard, quantitative science. For the first time, there was a bridge between the tiny, invisible world of atoms and the big, macroscopic world of elements you could actually hold. This idea became the foundation for literally everything that came next,
predicting reactions, understanding compounds, and even creating the periodic table.
And this is really the heart of the matter, the key takeaway here. Dalton's real genius wasn't coming up with the atom. That idea had been floating around for ages. His revolution was making the atom useful. By giving it a property you could measure, he turned a philosophical daydream into the single most powerful tool chemistry has ever had.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Dalton found a way to measure the invisible. He built a bridge between an abstract idea and cold, hard data. Without that crucial step, would the science of chemistry as we know it today, would it even exist at all?